Welcome to episode 4 of the Smart with a Heart podcast. In this episode, we are pleased to introduce Christian Ochoa. Hailing from West Michigan, Christian is a first-generation college student and proudly represents his Mexican-American heritage. A graduate of West Point, he commissioned as a field artillery officer in 2019. Throughout his military career, Christian has shown exceptional leadership, managing rocket artillery units at the company and platoon levels in both the United States and South Korea. Currently, he is completing a DoD SkillBridge internship with Uber, where he serves as a technical program manager on the cloud transformation, operation, and partnerships team. Looking ahead, Christian is excited to join the full-time MBA program at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business this fall, with a keen interest in exploring leadership roles within the technology and healthcare sectors. Christian, so glad to have you. Thank you so much for being on with us today.
Happy to be here, Bryce.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Christian, like we kind of discussed in before press and record, you are the first person that we have on this podcast who is not currently on the board and working with the nonprofit Smart with a Heart, but you're the first person I'm interviewing who really is a consumer of the product, like somebody who participated, went through the program. And so I think this is really special for our listeners to hear about your story. But before we get into that, I want to explore a little bit more about your background. Like, who are you? I know you're a field artillery officer, but tell us, like, what has your story been, both like before West Point and then when you commissioned and you went artillery? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I think the story really begins in two cities, in Guadalajara, Mexico, and Little Rock, Arkansas, which is where my parents are from. They somehow found their way up to West Michigan and community learning center where my dad was learning English and my mom was learning how to type, and fell in love. And that's kind of where it starts, for my family. It's the first to go to college in my family. I'm also the youngest kid. So I got a lot of people in my corner, my 2 older sisters, nieces and nephews. And I'd say probably, the most life-changing call I've gotten was from my congressman letting me know that I got into West Point in 2014. I got the phone call. And then, finished the program there, legal studies major, commissioned field artillery, and I actually went to Korea in March of 2020, which is day 0 of the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
So everything changed. I learned very early on to be adaptable and to, roll with the punches. So that's kind of where my story started.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate you sharing the early beginning. It's funny you mentioned Little Rock, because my dad was actually stationed in Little Rock Air Force Base for a time. And then my spouse is also from West Michigan. So I find that's kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Where's she from?
That's great. So Fremont, Michigan.
Familiar.
Yeah. So, very small. She always shows me the bit and everything, which I don't understand. Yeah, there you go. Okay, great. Awesome, man. So tell me, you went FA, and then you had a glorious stint in Korea during the horrible lockdown, I assume. When did you start thinking about the MBA? Because you mentioned you were a legal study undergrad. So why business degree?
Yeah. So, to be completely honest, when I was at the academy, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I heard that legal studies was, A, I heard it was easy. And B, I also kind of wanted to be a lawyer. I wasn't sure. I was thinking I'd do the FLET program or something. Going back, I might change it, but it's whatever. But for the first 3 or 4 years of my career, I honestly thought that I was going to be in for the long term. Because I had a really good battalion commander who mentored me a lot, and honestly thought that I was going to be on that path to be a battalion commander myself. But then, honestly, a couple different factors were at play. One, my wife did not really like the military lifestyle, and I had to agree with her there. We're not living in very awesome places. We're in Oklahoma, and then I was overseas. She didn't like that I was overseas. So it's kind of, I'd say the biggest thing was my long-term goals for my family, because I wanted to be closer to home. I wanted to have more flexibility in what I could do. And that's really what triggered okay, I'm going to get out of the Army, but now what am I going to do once I get out? Did a bunch of research, and that's when the MBA really kind of bubbled up as probably the strongest path for me to follow.
Gotcha. Yeah. You're probably a lot like me when you start to see a trickle of your classmates just leaving the military slowly and then going into these programs. You're like, what's Wharton? what's Booth? Like, what is this? No, so I totally understand. And my wife can certainly relate to you on the level of not really appreciating the lifestyles associated with the military and where we're geographically living at all the times. Okay, tell me then, after you knew that you wanted to go on your MBA program, what about the transition? What was that like, and how'd you go about it?
Yeah, so honestly, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Like once the process kind of started, like I didn't realize, everything that would, like all the dominoes that would fall after that. I'm sure you kind of can relate to like, starting something and seeing it through. Like I'm like, okay, I have to finish this now. Um, so it really started with like the test prep because I was looking at the schools. I was like, okay, well, I kind of, Ross looks cool. That's probably like the highest I could shoot for, right? Because I don't know, humble kind of guy. I was like, I'm never getting into like an M7 or whatever. I started looking at like the test scores needed. That's like where I really started, was like, okay, what's like the median? What's like the averages? And that's when I was like, okay, so I'm gonna have to study. And for the first month or two, I tried to do like the self-directed thing. Didn't really work out. And then I tried some other like test prep programs. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to, badmouth anyone. But they just didn't work for me. I know they worked for other people, but they didn't work for me. And then I stumbled on Smart with the Heart by Sherpa Prep, and I felt like, well, it's a very affordable program, and I wasn't trying to spend a lot more money on test prep. But B, I really like the structure combined with like the human element of getting like the real life tutor that you can like check in with, go over questions. And I'm a true believer in like, if you follow the process that they have, if you follow like each step and you do what they say, like do the error logs, go back and do the problems that you've got wrong, making like a consistent habit, like that's really what made the difference for me.
No, I totally get that. Okay, yeah, and the program, when you mentioned error logs, I was just like, oh my gosh, I remember how detailed those were. Because like when you sign up to do the conversation with Nafeez or Jay, they actually reference the error logs of all the problems that you either had issues with or maybe took you longer than you were supposed to. And it was incredibly detailed. So I, like you, did use another software program, like a preparation program, but they had nothing like that, right? It was just sample problem and then explanation video of how to watch it, right? So before we get into specifically Smart with Heart and how that benefited your journey, like the transition, for instance, like were you starting to get out in Korea, or did you do a CSP beforehand? Like how did that timeline work for you?
Yes. I had, so basically before then, I moved from ForceCom to TRADOC because I was getting that idea that I wanted to get out and I didn't want to be deployable and I didn't want to go to Triple C. So I deferred Triple C and they moved me across the railroad tracks at Fort Sill from, the ForceCom units to the TRADOC units, which really allowed me to, get control of my schedule just because I knew, well, it's all cycle based. You're doing 9 weeks of basic training and then you got a couple weeks where you're off cycle and pick up again. So it's predictable. And then also, there's not as much field time. So that was kind of the context in which I started my test prep was, removing myself from the higher paced environment kind of deliberately. And then, using that time, using the opportunity to really hone in on the test prep and everything else that follows after that, the applications.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And then beyond Smart with a Heart, what other programs did you find integral in, say, the MBA application process?
Yeah, so I'd say there's two other ones that really helped out. In terms of programs, there's Service to School, which if you're a service member, you definitely should have heard of by now. And if you haven't, you should definitely look them up. Where it was paired with a mentor who went through all of my resume iterations, my essays, all that. Someone who's been there and done it and can now, put a fresh set of eyes on your product. I also used Management Leadership for Tomorrow, short is MLT, and they help traditionally underrepresented students get admission to MBA programs. So if that's you, I highly recommend that program as well.
Awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, did you apply to the Luna Cap Fellow program? Right? Yeah. So there is so much I have found for those of us who fall within the minority categories applying to these higher education or graduate institutions. But even something like a fellowship program is something that could greatly benefit you, especially if you don't have your full GI Bill, or maybe you don't qualify for VRE or VOC rehab. It's important to actually have these programs in your back pocket. But no, I totally agree. Yeah, like SITREFs to CIRCAs, I don't know if you ever logged on those, but like services school, that was huge. And then, yeah, Smart with a Heart was certainly integral in my application process. Like, that's why I'm doing this podcast. They helped me so much that I felt overwhelmed by the need to give back. So, that's why I'm here today. So let's go back to your experience with Smart with a Heart. Like, how far in advance to applying round one? Because that's what you said. You got in round one to Booth. So how far in advance did you start using the Smart with a Heart program in preparation for the application?
Yeah. So, I want to say that I started in May. Now, keep in mind, I did, test prep from June to May. That wasn't very fruitful. And then May is when I really was like, okay, I got to get serious about this because, summer's coming up. So I'd say May to late June, early July. I know it's like a nine-step program. I'm not sure if it's the same now as when I did it, but I really tried to do one step a week and did it fully. Did everything that I was supposed to do. But I think once I got to like step 6, I felt confident to book a test. So I went ahead and did that and was happy with my score. If I wasn't happy, I was going to do, the next couple steps and then retake it, but it ended up working out.
Awesome. Okay, so you said from May to late June, early July is when you studied.
About 6 weeks, yeah.
And you crushed all those steps within that amount of time?
Yeah.
Okay, so Christian.
I wish I had my wife in here with me because she'd come home from work and I would have the monitors up, I'd have the book open, I'd be doing that. And, it's kind of like, I think it's something common in the military. Like once we get going with something, we're like, all right, we gotta just crush it and see it through. So,
and that is what you did. Wow. You are an academically inclined individual. I'm just going to have to say that right off the bat, because like, not only did you do legal studies at West Point, but also just the rate at which you completed that it took me a little bit longer, especially I did it in the mornings before like I went to PT, for instance. I did it in the afternoons when I was a company commander and, I had lunch break. And then like when I got home after my wife would go to bed, like that's when I would also do it. So like I was trying to do pockets of it each day, but because it was asynchronous, because you could pick up the recording where you left off, and because everything was like uploaded to a Google Drive, essentially, like the mistake checklist, pretty much the error log, the fact that was all uploaded made it super easy to kind of work through everything. So okay, no, I totally get it. My spouse would say the same thing about like just working nonstop on it. Awesome. Did you use Nafees or Jay's like check-in opportunities at all?
So I definitely use the check-ins. I think you get like 4 or something. I used 2. But yeah, the check-ins were great. I think honestly, like I know we talked a little bit about it before, but the error log I think was really the key that kind of unlocked my progress. And I think, some people who have taken the standardized tests or who are thinking about it right now, they can probably relate to that feeling of, or maybe it's just me, but I was always afraid for some reason to get a question wrong, or like I didn't want to face the fact that I didn't know the question. So keeping the error log, it's kind of like if you spend so much money on the weekend, you don't want to check your credit card balance, right? It's like it's not good, but you don't want to face the reality of it. But like overcoming the hurdle of I know I'm not strong in this sector of math or whatever, but I have to check the balance, see where I'm at, and then make a plan from there. So yeah, honestly, that was probably the turning point, was being honest with myself with the error log, going back to it, checking it out, making a plan, all that stuff.
No, I totally get it. And for our listeners, just so you're aware, when you sign up for the program, you get a couple of, I think it's 4 of these check-ins with our primary tutors and founders. That's either Jay or Nafees. And effectively, you call them and you sit down with them and you talk about, hey, these are the problems or types of problems I'm having issues with the most. They reference your error log and then really kind of help you create a game plan to address them. They talk talk through some of the sticking points for you. So that's where that boutique tutoring really comes to fruition. You're not going to get that anywhere else unless you are hiring somebody to do that for you specifically. But this is just a, categorical facet of what the program actually offers. And it's hilarious because you're offering, you're getting 6 months of this program for $250, which is basically the same amount of money you pay to even take a GRE. And it's just far better than having to commit substantially to other online programs, which again, we're not going to bad talk any of them because they're all great in their own way. But yeah, like the value out of this particular program is absolutely incredible. And I don't know about you, like, how did you find the program, and were you immediately drawn to it, or were you kind of skeptical about the fact that it was only $250?
I actually don't really remember how I learned about it. It might have been on Reddit. I was like spending a lot of time on Reddit at that time, looking at r/MBA and r/GRE and all that stuff. But it must have popped up as like a comment with a bunch of upvotes, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And yeah, like, for me, like, I did get a little skeptical that it was like so cheap for what it was saying that it was offering. I was like, Is it really like offering this for that much? But I saw that it was like a nonprofit, and I was like, okay, well, that's like a green flag. And I think you get like a trial. I did the trial, and the trial was like, okay, yeah, I can work with this. I looked at all, what the steps were, all the things that they provide you, and I was like, okay, yeah, I think I can do it with these resources, and then, full sense and paid for it. So.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I think when I was introduced to it initially, like CJ LeConte, one of my classmates and peers, he referred me to Shut the Prep, and that's where I was initially exposed to it. But then I started, I was on a services school and a Sit Reps to Steer Co's webinar, and they were talking about Smart with the Heart, and I was like, oh man, this must be a sign to check it out. And that's how I really got plugged in with it. And yeah, it certainly helped me out, similar to you. No, man. So Christian, when finalizing everything that we've been discussing to get today, I would love to know, like, what advice would you offer to anyone, not just veterans, but anyone who, wants to follow in your footsteps, pursuing graduate school, maybe even an MBA program, and is about to start that application process? Like, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I would say, like, anything that is worth doing is worth, putting in the work. Right. So there was people that were in, when I was in the 3 shop, there was other captains there who, wanted to do the MBA, but they couldn't, really roll up their sleeves and get after like the GMAT or GRE. And then they're like, well, I'll just apply to test waiver schools. And then they end up not even applying. And then they don't even know like what they're doing now, but they're out now. So it's like, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, but you can do it. So definitely, find the resources. I think Smart the Heart's one. If it vibes with you, look for other, kind of groups, find your tribe, find your support system. And then, that's how you keep going, right? Because inspiration lasts for like a little bit, but what you need is like that continued discipline, motivation to see it through.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that, Christian. Well, I think this will be a great episode for our listeners to hear from somebody who went through the program. Again, not on the board yet, but super appreciative of your time, and looking forward to see what you do at Booth come this fall.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Bryce. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Take it easy.